Tuesday, July the 21st. We got a Power Pack show today. So I'm going to go ahead and give out our phone number if you want to call in at 816-599-6893, 816-599-6893, and log in to our social media platform, which is kuaw.org, kuaw.org. You can always still email us and the whole nine through there. KUAW985 at gmail.com. KUAW985 at gmail.com. So today's topic is mental health. All right. Today's topic is mental health and illness. I wanted to talk about that just off of the strength of, been reading a lot of different stories that most of us have probably seen. Some of us may not have seen, but a lot of things have been over the social media platform. One actually two stories in specific is one Tamar Braxton. I don't know if anybody heard about Tamar Braxton. They were afraid for, afraid for her life, thinking that she was going to commit suicide and things like that. She wrote a cryptic letter talking about some things that wasn't quite right, and things aren't really lining up in her life and things like that. So you look at that, and then us on the outside looking in and saying, well, what in the world could be wrong? You got everything that anybody could have, or everything that we think that everybody could want, or anybody that could want. But a lot of times, we can want everything and have everything in life around us, but if you don't have that peace within, that right there is the biggest thing that really, really is missing in our life. Without having that peace within, that is something that we really need to take a look at. And Tamar Braxton's going through something right now, and we definitely need to keep her in our thoughts and our prayers, and really just reach out. Just send love that way. We may not be able to connect with them, but just send love and respect that way. And there's been some stories about people thinking Kanye West is still, off his rocker and stuff. So he's been going through some things as far as, him crying on stage and things like that. Really just been really emotional, and it seemed like it's been a little unstable at times. So, a lot's going on. But without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce my first guest to the show today before time gets away from us. Mr. Burton Rogers, how are you? Okay, hold on. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you hear me
sir.
now?
Yes. How you
Okay.
doing?
I'm doing all right. How are y'all doing?
Man, doing well. My hat looks crooked. Maybe I need to take it off. I'll just take it off. Folks think something going on, but no, I want to reach out to you just because of this. On this topic, man, it's real heavy.
Mhm.
I want to do it some justice. I don't want to kind of just go gloss past it. I want to take this whole subject from A all the way through, and this won't be the last time we have this subject on mental health. I think that's a subject that really needs to be talked about in our
Mhm.
community, and not be afraid of. But without further ado, man, I want you to tell the listeners about yourself if you wouldn't mind.
Oh no, no problem at all. Bert Rogers. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've been in the field for almost 10 years now. Started out with undergrad at Mizzou and Columbia, and then did my graduate programming about at Stevens College. And
Yeah,
then from there, I worked in residential, hospitals, outpatient, inpatient.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's kind of and now I have a private practice. I'm part of a group practice. I'm part of Midtown Psychological Services. Me, myself, and head count 8 other clinicians, 2
Nice.
psychologists, 6 therapists, and such. So we try to serve the community as best we can.
Absolutely, man. Listen, thank you for responding. I really appreciate that. Thanks a lot. Uh, I really want to talk about this. So, lend us your a little bit of your take on mental health, man, and where we are, and some of the different things that we can kind of talk about.
Oh, for sure. Well, to boil down, like I'm a trauma therapist at my core. I specialize in trauma therapy. So a lot of the times we see from a mental health standpoint, so excluding psychosis where someone loses track of where they are in reality.
Right.
A lot of the stuff we deal with are over functioning or under functioning survival tactics.
Mm,
So we're talking about the ability of someone, if you think of someone who struggles with anxiety, say,
right.
um, in that situation, that person is, they feel a great deal of fear coming in from their brain as a whole, and then they try to learn ways to manage that throughout the
Right.
course of their life, depending on when that fear came on.
Right.
and particularly how a person deals with that, that can become a problem later on, or it can become an adaptive thing later on too, as well. If they learn how to do coping skills at a very young age. So, someone like myself, who, if you see a kiddo very, very young, you can give them all the tools and techniques they need to kind of help navigate, their anxieties, their depression, things on those lines. And
Right.
then from there, as they get older, they won't have these huge, huge kind of stacked on top of each other maladaptive coping mechanism that could turn to something else. Or
Right.
some, one teenager's anxiety becomes tomorrow's, substance use problem if it's not unchecked.
Right. So you said trauma. So trauma, I guess trauma can mean a whole gamut of different things. Some people have trauma as
Mm-hmm.
far as a certain type of abuse growing
Uh-huh.
up. Certain people can have trauma as far as losing a loved one. That can be
Uh-huh.
very traumatic toward people. Folks can have trauma as far as a lot of things that they see.
Sure.
In their
Uh-huh.
community.
Absolutely.
I think all of those things can be traumatic to a lot of people. So that's just one aspect of some things
Uh-huh.
that could really
Uh-huh.
damage somebody. And how do we see that? I mean, how do we is there certain traits that we can look at and see? Well, wait a minute, this person's acting kind of standoffish or by themselves, or or lashing out, or what are some of the things that we can look at?
I mean, the thing you really want to keep an eye on. I mean, there's the classic signs of say PTSD when you talk about someone who is, having flashbacks or
Mm,
nightmares. They have a lot of trouble regulating themselves from an emotional standpoint.
right.
Struggles with going to sleep, staying asleep. Those are the kind of things I would look for.
Sure.
But also a lot of the traumas that we experience, particularly in our community,
Yeah.
are so normalized that we don't see the signs of trauma too as well.
Yeah.
So you're going to see a marked change in someone's behavior too as
Mm,
well. So if Lil Jamal on Tuesday was doing well in school and things are going well, and all of a sudden by Friday, he's really really struggling.
right.
He's really maybe between Tuesday and Friday he witnessed something in his neighborhood that was awful, horrific.
Sure.
At that point, then is he withdrawn away from his family and friends? He's not talking to people as much, and he's lashing out in
Yeah.
school when he really was the kind of kid who's lashing out. I mean, or in terms of change in terms of how he copes too as well, because trauma at its core, it's one that overruns your ability to cope.
Yeah.
It's an event that overruns your ability to cope with it. And a lot of the events that people seeing, or we're seeing over and over and over again, are chronic kind of
Mm,
traumas as a whole.
yeah.
Things that aren't regular, like
Right.
seeing growing up on, because I grew up on the east side of Kansas City, so growing up
Sure.
and seeing and hearing, seeing people getting shot
Right.
or hearing gunshots at night,
Yeah.
sirens on a regular basis,
Yeah.
all those kind of dangerous situations.
Yeah.
Those are traumatic.
Sure.
Those are not situations that our nervous systems are equipped to actually deal with on a
Absolutely.
regular basis.
Yeah.
So we being the resilient people we are, we find effective communal ways to
Yeah.
cope with that.
Yeah.
But communal trauma, like trauma that afflict all of us, so we talk about police brutality and things
Hmm.
along those lines, can overrun the community's ability to hold on to that trauma too as well and to
Yeah.
heal.
Yeah.
And then I can spend a whole time talking about intergenerational trauma, about how it's
Yeah.
passed on from generation to generation, and the things the
So
coping
does that
skills that yeah.
does that really affect anybody? And I know you got a few more minutes with us, but so
Yeah, sure.
intergenerational, going from generation to generation, do
Mhm.
we take on that?
It's a there's a short answer and a long. Actually, I do actually have a little extra time too
Sure.
as well, because my 4:30 has not confirmed yet,
Okay.
so I have a little bit more time with you guys right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So the long answer and short answer is yes, and then how does it affect us?
Mm,
So long story short, I mean, all that stress hormone that we get when we get in a threatening or scary situation as a whole, that affects those levels as we go through life. That trauma itself is not resolved.
yeah.
So if there's a situation where you saw something, you froze up, and you're like, I couldn't do anything, I
Yeah.
couldn't act on that. But then you find different ways to cope with it as you get
Mm,
older, or different ways to cope with it as you move through life. Then your kids will inherit some of that stress hormone that you didn't deal with,
yeah.
and
Because
that
it's
affects
because
that
it's more
affects their baseline.
it's more than just I think it's more than just us being the initial shock of seeing it, but
Hmm.
it's taking the shock, and for that shock value we get shocked, but it does something to our body. It jolts our body
Oh,
and it gets down inside us, right?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's a lot of traumatologists who talk a lot about that idea. A lot of the body-based trauma clinicians talk a lot about that idea, about how it's not just in the event that we see, but it's also in how our body responds to further stressors as life goes along. So you could
Right.
have a situation where, the straw that breaks the camel's back kind of situation. Like, okay, I can absorb that one and move through life. I can go to school, I can go to class, I can go to work,
Right.
and then there's another one, and then there's another one, and there's another one. After
Right.
a while, you start to see symptoms that I might see in the office is anxiety or depression or struggles with relationships or struggles with your own self-esteem because trauma affects all of that. It's like as if a bomb goes off in your psyche, and you have to figure out how to restructure things as you go along.
Yeah, so it's like the ripple effect when you throw a rock in the water, it hits that spot, but the ripples go out beyond where that impact was.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that happens in families. That can happen through generations too as well. Because then, if you have that ripple effect going off, say in your grandmother's life or in your mother's life, that affects how they cope with things. That also affects how they parent too as well.
Yeah.
And then, we can go into a whole line of events about what situations what resources are available in each community in terms of how they can heal, and how systemic racism and institutional racism actually impact because that's traumatic too by itself.
It is.
Other because of who you are is a traumatic event as a whole.
Wow. Yeah, man, that's impressive and scary at the same time. But it's something I think that really needs to be unpacked, and the reason why I had this show is because I've been just looking at different stories, and I've been we've been quarantining for months and months on end, and I had a conversation with someone the other day. They were talking, we were talking about why you see these people kind of going crazy, with, yelling at people for not having a mask and coughing on. You see people coughing in people's faces and people doing this, and folks just acting crazy. And I was like, well, because for one, we weren't meant to be alone. When you're locked up in jail and things like that, and what's one of the things when you get in trouble, and they put you away, they put you in solitary confinement. Well, solitary confinement is you by yourself all day long,
Exactly.
and that's supposed to break the person, because you're not supposed to, even when you look in the Bible scriptures, God said it's not good for man to be alone.
Be alone.
So by us having to quarantine ourselves and not have social distances and face mask and not be around everybody, that starts to break down who we are as human beings. Yeah.
Very true. Very, very, very true. There's an entire social engagement system that we have, and it's getting that whole thing was really getting jammed in that process by us being quarantined. Yeah. Like in terms of being able, the things that help us regulate our emotions and regulate our physiology have a lot to do with face-to-face contact with another human being, feeling safe, another human being's presence, physical touch, even the simple act of dapping or high-fiving somebody can help regulate someone. Someone saying like, "Hey, are you okay?" and giving you a touch on the shoulder or something like that. That is regulated. That's not even just a skill-based psychology thing. That's just how physiology works. We are social creatures. So the idea of us being isolated and away from people. I mean, I've seen an uptick in people who struggle with I haven't been around people for a while, and I'm doing these Zoom therapy sessions, and I'm really dysregulated right now. I'm really anxious, or my anxiety's back, my depression's back, or I'm having an uptick in nightmares and things like that, because that ability that we have as a community to try to regulate ourselves. I mean, you can see it in our community as a whole. The ways we come together and our resilience as a people as a whole have a lot to do with our ability to regulate with our fellow human beings.
Yeah,
so whether that be through music, whether it be through singing, whether it be through dancing or anything along those lines, movement. I mean, all those things help us regulate, and it's not just in the therapy hour that can be helped, but just having a solid community can help. What we call resilience factors that involve in this situation. You have the things that contribute, that cause vulnerabilities for trauma, but then you have also the resiliency things that build resources for a person to regulate themselves. And right now with COVID, a lot of those are getting taken away, for our safety, but still, they're still getting taken away. It does a mental health impact too as well.
Absolutely, man. I totally agree with that. I got someone in that that just called in, wants to jump in on the conversation, man, and stuff. And he's got a background of exercise and things like that as well. So I'd like to add him to the conversation if you don't mind. Mr. Mike Patton, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you right now. Yes, sir.
How are you, sir? How are you doing?
Oh, man, I'm blessed and thank God here for another day.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Bert, can you hear him?
Yeah, I can hear him just fine.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
Okay, no, I got somebody else that's also on the line here, a psychologist, and we were wanting to we're adding you to the conversation, Mike. And the conversation was actually, I want like for you to introduce yourself. I can introduce you as my friend, my buddy Mike Patton from Mike's Main Event, but I'll let you go ahead and do the rest, sir.
Okay, well, I'm Mike's Main Event. I've only been owner of Mike's Main Event for about almost 30 years, and I've dealt with physical health therapy, different things as such. I dealt with dietary situation, lifestyle changes,
Yeah.
people that went off to the NFL, Major League Baseball, basketball players, etc. I'm seven-time bodybuilding champion, first African American to win in Miss Missouri, twice in '93 and '99, made it all the way to nationals, which I took second. Worked out with famous people like Ronnie Coleman and Flex Wheeler and all these guys on the same stage with Dexter Jackson and all these other guys back in the day.
Yes, sir.
But one thing that I deal with are inner city issues that we deal with people that have been out of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
We're not in slavery, but we're impoverished with economic deprivation, which causes us to deal with food and have the same mentality as almost being from the days of slavery, which we're not in anymore.
Yeah.
And so the types of foods that we eat are the foods that now we have around us, these fast food types of situations that have caused very much of an epidemic and pandemic dealing with us and our survival rate as African Americans.
Absolutely, yeah, and that was one of the reasons why I added you to and I called you the other day, because I do know that our diets and Brother Bird, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do know our diets and things like that, especially right now, are having a major effect on us, and that obviously what was the old saying, you are what you eat, and not only that, just like we talked about quarantine and then being by yourself and things like that, that's not real healthy for any of us. So we've kind of finding ways to cope with this, so we don't as they said, go crazy, go bananas.
Right.
So Mike, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The conversation that we have today isn't just a conversation for today.
Yeah.
But it's what's going to happen for the day that's going to now transcend into what we need to look for 10 years from now.
Yeah.
How will the X and Y generation now look the next 10, 15, 20 years, what we give them? And I'm not trying to put down any propriety, any type of establishment as of light versus chicken and things like that. And when that's in our daily menu and we don't know how to do this in moderation, it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
And because of the fast-paced type of old lifestyle that we have, going to work, pick up kids, daycare, well, of course, a lot of things have changed because of this pandemic of the COVID-19 virus that's now been set up. And so we sit at home, we go by the drive-by, get foods. We don't go a lot of times at grocery stores because of, the quarantine factor or the social distancing. So a lot of people are fearful of these things, and so they kind of go through the fast food type way. And there's a lot of triglycerides, a lot of things that the FDA does not really necessarily advocate so far as we eat, so far as pork and the types of foods, of medications and different things that they do to preserve these animals aren't right, and it can cause chronic heart failure. It can cause hypertension. It can cause diabetes because of now what they do to preserve now these animals. Now it's more of a political marketable piece, more so than how your health now that's beneficial, and now your health now is the beneficiary of what now they give you. They give you to sell. They don't give you to live.
Yeah. I've been reading articles, and one thing that's sticking out to me just before I get into this other little piece here, but my mother-in-law posted something the other day, and she said, everybody's kind of upset about what's going on, and everybody's inconvenienced, but has anybody really stopped to ask the children? And I thought that was very impactful. Has anybody stopped to ask the kids? The kids have been away from school, been away from their friends, can't go to the park, can't go to the swimming pool, couldn't go here, and that's affecting them. But nobody's, I don't think, but a lot of people really hadn't asked the kids, what's going on? Are you okay? As a child, they got, and that's important. So that. Go ahead.
And that is an important conversation, but see, that's a tough conversation because kids can't tell you what they have not been taught.
Yeah.
Kids can't tell you from an environment they have not been accustomed to. And we're dealing with a lot of families right now that are dealing with single parents, in which now they're only maybe 15, 16, 17 years away from now their mother's age or their father's age. And so they're caught in a situation where I don't call it a pandemic, this is a mandemic.
Nah.
These are things that in the African American community, we have more children born out of wedlock than any other race here in America.
Wow.
We have more people now that are dealing with situations where there's split homes. There's not involvement so far as the economic inclusion from the father that lays the baby, makes the baby.
Yeah.
Now the mother's stuck by herself. So what do? You feed by the means that you have.
Oh, man.
And so whatever you have the means of, you now give to that child. So that child doesn't know what vegetables are, its importance, the carbohydrate, and the protein.
Yeah. Yeah.
How can a man learn has to be taught?
That's right.
How can a man be sent?
Yeah.
Or can a man preach lest he be sent? And I can't be sent anywhere ignorant of things I don't know.
Right.
And so we need to educate these mothers as to what now to feed the children. But see, that's another discussion because they can only get what they can afford. If you're in the government
yeah.
and things like that, you are in the lower part of now the very spectrum of the type of food you can get.
Yeah.
In other words, like if a person is low income, they can get maybe some red meat that costs less. But guess what? You're looking at 75, 80% of that being lean. You have another 20% that's fat, as opposed to the person now that has more money, they get something 93 or 97% that costs more money, but they can't afford it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we have to look at affordability. We have to look at these things that now are part of what we have in our ability to now function, the economics that we have that are available to us.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Mr. Bird, let me ask you a question. So right now we're seeing what's going on with our children, and we're seeing the effects of self quarantine and COVID and social distancing and masks and things like that. I'm afraid that in the near future, man, if we don't really help our kids to understand what's going on and kind of navigate through it, they can be affected by this long term.
Absolutely.
Well, they are going to be affected by it long term.
Hold on, Mike. Hold on for 1 sec. Go ahead and answer that, will you please?
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can have a situation where if you are not intervening in some kind of way and providing a place for your kiddos to actually talk about what's going on. Because the thing is, with kids, the younger they are, the more likely they're not gonna come to you and say, "Hey, mom, dad, I'm stressed about X, Y, and Z." What they're probably gonna come to you and say is, "I can't sleep. Or I have a stomach ache, or or can I sleep in the bed with you, or can you, all these kind of bids for connection and and also telling you that, oh, my physiology is stressed out, but they won't. But again, being that young, they'll tell you that I have a headache. Because if you think about it and Mr. Patton can speak a lot to this idea because he's from the physical aspect, but from a trauma perspective and how trauma affects the physiology as a whole.
Right.
You can have a situation where this kid is like going through the whole day, braced, tense, their jaw is tense, they have headaches, they're not digesting their food well enough. Not only they're not getting the input in terms of what they're getting, the quality of the food they're getting, but they're also not digesting it because their physiology is so stressed out. They're like, so it really affects how they engage. It can affect a bunch of different scenarios. So just even the idea of having, being able to try to explain as best you possibly can what's going on. So with my kiddos, I have a 6-year-old, a 2-year-old, and they went on spring break and never went back to school.
Wow,
They went from we're gonna go on spring break, and then they just never went back because that's when shelter in place went in effect, like maybe a couple of days after that.
Mike, are you back with us?
So,
yeah, I'm right here.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was making sure Mike jumped back in.
That's okay. So in that situation, like it took us a minute to kind of explain like what was going on.
Right.
We got more information about well, what is the coronavirus? What is that? What does that actually mean?
Absolutely.
Why do I have to wear a mask? Well, this is why you have to wear a mask. And why can I see my friends? Well, we want to make sure no one gets sick. And how I'm going to learn. So explaining even at their pace and onboarding them in such a way, because the thing that helps at least try to help metabolize all the stress hormone is having sense of orientation, like what's happening next, what are the next steps, and as we get that information as parents and as adults, it's best to try to pass it on as best you possibly can
Absolutely.
to the littles, so you won't have that long term effect, and then creating rituals for connection during that time frame. So I'm gonna show my hand just a little bit in this situation. Like before my kiddos go to bed,
Yeah.
I make sure for my oldest, we try to play video games together. We try to go outside. We try to I have a heavy bag in my garage, so
Yeah.
I give her a box of
Absolutely.
something where so she can organize her day around.
Keep you going. Yeah.
And the same thing for my youngest. We will play Connect
Physical,
Four, build
right.
blocks, but just anything along those lines where you have I'm explaining
Yeah.
to you the stress that's incoming, but I'm also giving you a home base to return to.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think Mike can hear you, but I can hear I can hear you. So he's saying hello.
Okay.
But so Mike, he was talking about the physiological the part the physiology. There you go. I know you can say it, man. That aspect of just the young people going into what's happening right now, and how that could affect them, later on if they're not properly, trained and
That's right.
and ready for what's what's here.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, what happens is I'm on the phone on the radio right now. We deal in a situation. See, this whole situation when we start school, we got to get down to now where the brass taxes are, so far as the way our economy and the way our whole system is structured. If kids stay away from school, a lot of kids are going to be deprived from school lunch programs. Now, what he's saying physiologically, the growth rate, the hormone situation, dealing with kids' ability from the endocrine system, from the heart, from the kidney, from the liver, all these things being deficient because of the amount of triglycerides and the amount of sugar being put in them because they're eating like a lot of fast foods now can impair the very growth of the things that they need in order for them now to facilitate adolescent function. And so now you can have people not maturing or maturating into the physiological condition or the genetics that they were now supposed to be in so far as the lack of food is concerned, which they are in other countries. I don't think that's going to happen here because now when you talk about that situation, then we talk about the biological construct dealing with people over in Haiti, people over in Syria, people over in Africa who have not even 1/3 of what we have.
Yeah.
We think we have something poor over here. I want to make this known to everybody that the poorest person over here normally we see sometimes and oftentimes are overweight. The poorest people you see over there are almost skin and bones. You tell me what that problem is.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah. Wow.
And so one of our situations is the fact that, again, we got people that are in conditions in our area, and our civil liberties are different here than they are in other types other countries.
Yeah.
We have the ability now to put in a lot of food and gain a lot of weight, but we don't exercise. Why? Because we don't have places now that we can afford to go to, nor are we arranged in the right environment to be taught why it's so necessary. So when you take these kids away from the school, you not only take away school lunch programs, the recess, or you take away points from now of the recreational pieces or the physical education that they do in their gym classes. So a lot of things is about to transpire based upon now the ability of what we had 20 years ago, 10 years ago, last year, 2 years ago, won't be the same now.
Absolutely. So, Mike, we're going to go to a break and we're going to restart the show. How can people reach out to you if they need to reach out to you, Mike?
You can reach out with me at Mike's Main Event. My name is Mike Patton. I'm at 816-916-3503. That's 816-916-3503.
Wonderful, Mike. Listen, I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, brother.
All right, brother. Take care. All right, appreciate you. And Mr. Burton Rogers, absolutely. How can people reach out to you, brother? They need to contact you.
The best way to get a hold of me is via email. It's BurtRogersCounseling@gmail.com. That's BURT Rogers ROGERS counseling@gmail.com. Easiest way to get a hold of me.
Absolutely wonderful. Hey man, listen, thank you for your time, man, and I'll reach back out to you again, brother.
Yes,
Thank you guys. Y'all take care.
Right,
you do the same, man. Take care. All right, y'all listen to Street Therapy KC on KUAW Radio, Knowledge, Understanding, and Wisdom. We'll be right back after these messages. All right. All right. Thank you guys for holding on, man. Like I said, this is Street Therapy on KUAW Radio. Knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, the voice of the community here in Kansas City, Missouri. You're sitting in the air chair with your man Chris CJ. We're actually talking about mental health today. A topic that we're trying to hit from a few different angles, but we really want to just scratching the surface and try not to get heavy, but definitely want to make an impact so we can continue to have this conversation. I want to introduce two people to the show right now. You might not be able to hear each other because one's on the Zoom and one's on the phone call. So, but we're going to try to navigate this as best as I can here. I know Jesse, you can probably hear Tawana. Tawana might not be able to hear you, but I'm going to introduce Tawana to the show here real quick. Jesse, hold on for 1 second. Tawana,
Absolutely.
Are you there with us?
Yes, I am.
How are you?
I am doing well. How are you this afternoon?
Doing good. I'm speaking with Mrs. Tawana Clark Shepherd. Tawana, I'd like for you to just introduce yourself to the folks who may not know you, and so we can kind of get a understanding of who you are and what you do.
Okay. I will try to keep it brief because I wear lots of hats. But
Okay.
for purposes of this show today, I am a licensed mental health professional in private practice here in the Kansas City area.
Yeah.
I specialize in trauma-informed and oriented care. I treat everyone from children to, full-on adults. I have a specific passion for bringing mental health awareness to communities of color, I like to call it.
Yeah.
I have been doing media-oriented awareness for a couple of years, had a couple of radio show spots dating back to, I think, 2018, maybe when I started my show, Talk About It with Tawana, where I try to take a lot of the stigma out for underserved communities so that they will be more encouraged to access mental health care that is so desperately needed.
Okay. Wonderful. And I'm going to introduce Jesse Thomas. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
Man, doing well. Listen, thank you for jumping in and spare the moment.
No problem, man. I appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. So, Jesse, man, I'd like for you to introduce yourself to folks that so you can folks know who you are and what you stand for, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, man, Jesse Thomas III. I wear many hats, I guess you could say, but I'm a gym owner, personal trainer, fitness coach, sports performance coach. So, I mean, you sum it up, I guess you could say I'm a gym nut, man. I run the gym out here, and I'm always in the gym. It's what I love to do. Bodybuilder, you name it.
Nice. So we're gonna jump back to Tawana. Now the topic today is mental health. In our last two callers, we talked a little bit about the trauma that could be brought on from early on childhood trauma into the present, but also Mr. Mike Patton talked about how our meal and our diets and things, especially right now with people are kind of not having a lot of money and resources and trying to really kind of get what they can get. What is your take, Tawana? What's your take on our mental status right now? And on the onset of the show, I talked a little bit about. I don't know if you heard about was it Tamir Braxton? She had a situation where they were kind of watching out for her. She thought she was going to commit suicide and things. And also I talked a little bit about Kanye West, his rant and stuff. And they've been talking about Kanye for years, saying is he crazy or is he mental? What is the state of Black America as far as the mental capacity in you guys' standpoint?
Wow, yeah, that's a loaded question.
I know.
So, so as best as I could surmise that,
yeah,
I would take it more from an individual posture,
yeah,
or vantage point. Because here's one of the things that when I do teach in large groups, when I'm asked to come and speak to larger groups, everyone experiences trauma.
right.
Trauma has now recently, in the past decade, become defined differently, and the definition has been generalized to any experience mostly unexpected, that a person is exposed to that affects them in a negative manner over the a complete expanse of their life. So it impacts their ability to function and to think straight. We all have some form of trauma. How well we deal with it depends on our personal level of resilience. What we are seeing now is a combination of people who already had unresolved trauma, that's where I would place like the Kanye's, okay?
Yeah.
And then you take that and you add on the global trauma, right? And the community trauma with the social justice heat rising to the top. And then you add on post-traumatic slave syndrome, which is a real syndrome that was identified a few years back. And you take that and you add that encompasses our economics and disparities and how they impact African Americans at an alarming rate, right? So if you put all of that in like a large soda bottle and you shake it up, you're going to get explosion.
Right.
And that's what you're seeing.
Wow.
And then you talked about, I listened just a little bit before I called in. I specialize personally in holistic mental health care.
Right.
So I'm all about the body and how the body and the brain must have a symbiotic relationship. That's really difficult to do when, one, you don't have resources, and that main resource is knowledge. The African American community usually does not, well, should I say, by far and large, the African American community lacks that knowledge. We have been kept out of the knowledge of the importance of eating healthy. That goes back historically to systemic racism, and so how we had to eat what we could get. Here's the thing. The resource acquisition or the access may have changed over the years, but when you haven't taken the time to go back and reteach that, you still have people eating kind of just whatever, right? And buying the misnomer that they can't afford to eat better.
Right. Right.
Okay. And so one of the things that I try to work with clients on, because I've done it as a single mother of 3 children. My children are all grown now, but I raised them pretty much by myself and discovered about 14 years ago the impact that food was having on my son. Developed migraines out of nowhere. Went from being an honor student to struggling mightily. And so long story short, I discovered the correlation between food as medicine and not as pleasure. So it's stuff like that. I mean, that's like I said, it's a loaded question, but all of those things have an impact.
And see, that's why I introduced Jesse to the conversation, because he is a personal trainer and he is in the physical arena as far as the body health and things like that. And stopped by the shop one day. We talked a little bit about it and everything. My practices aren't the greatest, but but I'm learning. All right, I'm learning.
Give yourself grace. Give yourself grace, but be intentional. We've got one body. I teach people got one body, and if you can just commit 1 week at a time to change one thing.
Yes, indeed. Yeah,
right?
yes.
You'll see a huge difference
Absolutely.
in how you think.
Jesse, let me ask you a question, Jesse. As far as the nutrients, man, obviously we know that we don't even get half of our food or half of our nutrients, our vitamins, our supplements from what we're eating out here. Man, what is your take on just getting what the body needs, man? Body came from the dirt. The body is a machine.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, you just simply can't eat enough food to get all the nutrients and vitamins, minerals that you need. So, I mean, it was kind of mentioned before, it is tough. It is expensive to be healthy and to get everything you need. But I definitely recommend, finding a good, total body, vitamin or supplement that you can help with that.
Right.
They have, supplements. I mean, Walmart, right, has very affordable supplements when it comes to, your vitamin, or excuse me, your vegetable and fruit intake, right? Because again, you just simply can't eat enough vegetables and fruit. So having a supplement that can help provide you with what you're lacking, that's why it's called supplement, right? It'll go a long way. But just going down to the basics, right? Getting enough sleep and rest, water intake, and again, looking at what you put into your body. As it was mentioned earlier, your body is a temple. So putting, all these fats and greases that our culture has, for decades been used to, and we had to use what we had to, right, to survive and get by. But now it's catching up with this, right? So just simply starting over and trying to understand and get the knowledge of what to put in your body, what's healthy and what's not, can take you a long way. And more so than that, like I kind of, really, I want people to understand how fitness itself, along with nutrition, can help with your mental state, right? And I think it was mentioned before, those unresolved traumas, what do you do with it? How do you release that anger, that pent up anger, that aggression, that stress that you have? And for a lot of clients that I have, they come to the gym, and more so than anything, they just want to release. They want to talk to me. It's almost like I'm a therapist a lot of times. Like, it's not even about the weights.
Right.
It's a way for them to get some aggression out and talk to somebody that they feel are close to them and they can relate to. But also when you're working out, right, your body is releasing these endorphins that just make you feel good and make you feel better. And I equate it to this for me. A lot of people don't like to go to the gym, right? And a few years ago, I was running a non-for-profit where every Wednesday night I had to go down and I had to teach these kids. And after a long day at work, it was tough for me to actually want to go do that after doing it for so long. But every time I did it, every time I went there at the end of that session, I felt so much better about myself. I felt like I was helping those kids and they were helping me. And I tell people it's the same thing. You don't want to get off the couch and go to the gym and work out, but I guarantee you that once you get done with that workout, you're going to feel so much better about yourself. And that stems from, again, the endorphins that are released in your body. And then you just feeling better about yourself. Confidence, self-esteem, the whole 9 yards. I think it helps when you talk about, mental health. Fitness it's up there, along with nutrition in my book.
Absolutely. Let me add this to the conversation. Twana, were you able to hear what he said?
I can't hear him, but I can read it on your. Thankfully,
Oh, okay.
Phone, so I'm watching it on
Okay.
my other phone.
Okay.
So I to you on my.
I moved the microphone down to the headphones, hoping that you could hear it. But let me insert this, if I may, to the conversation. I talked a little bit about earlier when people are, say someone goes to jail and they get in trouble and things like that. Oftentimes is when someone gets in trouble, when they're locked up, where do they normally send them? They send them in solitary confinement. And when they send and when they send you to solitary confinement, you're supposed to be there by yourself, away from everybody. So basically, that's your timeout session, and that timeout session is supposed to, quote unquote, break you, and put you away from your thoughts, and it seems like right now people are like, well, wait a minute, I'm being punishment, but I haven't done anything wrong, So we're having to stay away from people. We're having to not touch people. We're having to stay in our home. We're having to wear masks. We're having to not, interact with people, not hug, not handshake, not high five, stay home, lock the doors, mask, and things like that. And it seems like psychologically, it seems like that we're in trouble, but we've done nothing wrong. And I think a lot of times that would make a person go bananas.
Absolutely. That is, you're square on, as I would say. I have seen a huge rise in new referrals because of people's inability to handle isolation. We were not created to thrive in isolation.
Scripture
we
says
were
it.
created to thrive in fellowship, via fellowship.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's really important that people find alternative ways to stay engaged, right? It's tough because if you're following what you think is the best thing to do according to the latest report, 1 minute you feel like you have to have complete abstinence from any contact from anyone,
Yep.
and then the next thing you see, oh, okay, you can if you wear a mask.
Absolutely.
The one thing that I have had to do that has been really tough, because I'm in a position where people seek out my input for advice.
Yeah.
And it's tough. But what I've had to do as a person of great faith is trust God with the advice that I'm giving,
Yeah.
because I can't be God. Ultimately, He's the only one that absolutely knows what we need to do.
Absolutely.
What I have been doing is helping people create, depending on their comfort level individually,
Yeah.
create unique ways to interact. So that means that if you do set up some time to meet somebody at a park, but you actually sit your chairs 6 feet apart and you wear masks, then you do that. The thing is, be intentional. If you are someone who really can only handle Zoom, then those calls need to be intentional. You need to intentionally set your schedule for interaction.
Let me ask you a question. How important is meditation? You know, sometimes you hear meditation. Obviously, you know, Scripture talks about meditation. There are a lot of people talking about meditation to clear your mind. You know, meditation is not bad. Meditation is really just clearing your mind and focusing. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on meditation? Jesse, are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, you know, as you mentioned before, I may not be the best at practicing, but I have read up on it and I have tried it in the past. And I do have. I'm sorry.
I was asking both of y'all. Are you familiar with it as well? I'll ask Jesse and he'll finish, and then go ahead.
Okay, so meditation is a cornerstone of how I practice holistically. You're absolutely correct. I had to learn myself by going back and relearning Scripture that meditation began in the Word of God. So God actually does not have a problem with meditation. He tells us to do it. The difference, I think, between some people of different religions is that we're taught to meditate to empty out all of the negativity and the toxicity, and this is how I teach meditation. You empty out toxicity and you invite in loving, kind, gracious thoughts about yourself and the world around you. One of the things that I do with meditation is also grounding. It has nothing to do with any religion. It's just helping a person who is in a state of panic, huge panic or mild panic. Just stop everything, practice intentional breathing, and locate the fact that right there in that moment,